Hello and welcome to Through the Bible. Today, episode 24, Exodus 13 through 16. In our scripture today, we see where God tells the people to consecrate their firstborn, the firstborn males of their household, and the firstborn animals. And the reason for that is because God spared the firstborn coming out of Egypt. And it also said that this will serve as a reminder. In other words, when they do that, when they consecrate the first male, when they consecrate the first animal unto the Lord, then the children are going to ask, why do we do this? And so they're going to reply and remind them about what happened. It's always good to have that memorial marker we talked about in Genesis, where we can look back, where we can point it to our children, that tradition, that liturgy in our churches, that thing that points us back to what God has done in the past and fulfills Revelation 12:11. It says they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They overcame the devil by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. We need a way to remind us of what our testimony is. Then there's the discussion on the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. We've talked about this before, the unleavened representing absent of sin. Leavened bread is often referred to with sin. And so it was an example, it was a type that showed that God wanted us to be pure, He wanted us to be holy. He said to treat this not eating leavened bread during this time as if it were a mark on your hand or your forehead. Now, this is important because we see in Revelation 13, we see this idea of a mark on your hand or your forehead, and it is the mark of the beast. Revelation 13, no one can buy or sell except he that has the mark. We also see, though, the seal of God in people's foreheads. So keep in mind that the idea of God is that we be sealed by Him and not by the enemy. It seems like all of our focus has gone on to the Antichrist and the mark of the beast and so forth, but in reality, that's just a counterfeit for being marked and sealed by God. They avoided, God sent them a certain way in the desert so that they would avoid battle because He was afraid they weren't ready for that yet. Well, He knew they weren't ready for that yet. And if they faced battle, they might want to turn back to Egypt. However, God also told them to kind of go in an unusual path to make it look as if they were confused in the desert. And this was so that Pharaoh's spies would report back to them and say, oh, they're confused. They're just wandering around in the desert. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know where they're going. And that this would harden Pharaoh's heart for one last judgment upon Pharaoh, who thought of himself as a god, and on Egypt, who had held them captive for 400 years. And so he does pursue them. His heart is hardened. He decides he's going to attack them. They have been being led at this point by a cloud by day and a fire by night, the angel of the Lord preceding them. And now that cloud, the angel and the cloud, both move to the back of the Israelites, becomes their rear guard, if you will. The cloud actually becomes light to the Israelites to shine their way forward, but it becomes a cloud of darkness to the Egyptians to confuse them, to cover the Israelites from them, to keep them from getting to them all night long. And that's the way it is with God. He's got a light side for those who love Him or are called according to His purpose, and He's got a dark side that blinds those that cannot see and have chosen not to see. So Pharaoh chases them. The people are fearful. The Israelite people are fearful. They cry out in this fear. And Moses tells them, the Lord will fight for you, but you must be quiet. And I think that's a great, great lesson for us to learn. We need to quit grumbling. We need to quit acting out in fear. And we need to trust the Lord. And sometimes we just need to be quiet. Be still and know that I am God. The Egyptians you see today, I love this scripture right here. God says, the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. So remember, when God does something miraculous in your life, those enemies that are coming against you, He doesn't ever want you to have to see them again. And sometimes it's going to take dramatic circumstances in order to make that happen, just like the Red Sea experience. So they go across on dry ground. Israel feared the Lord and believed when they saw that they were able to cross. Pharaoh was not able to cross. Pharaoh and his army was drowned in the Red Sea, as you read in the passage. And now it says that they feared the Lord, the people of Israel feared the Lord and had a great deep respect for Moses. So now all of a sudden, all of this grumbling, all this complaining, all this acting out, suddenly they have better feelings toward God and toward Moses. So now they get to the place in 15 of Marah, a place of bitter water. They weren't able to drink the water. It was bad for them. Guess what? Already they're grumbling against Moses again. They just saw what God did at the Red Sea, but now they're grumbling against Moses again. And God shows Moses a tree. And Moses takes the wood of that tree or the whole tree, we don't really know, but he puts it into the water. We see that the water becomes okay to drink. Now, it's important to recognize here the tree didn't do anything for that water. It was a prophetic act of what God was going to do. So they put the tree into the water. They put the tree into the bitter poison. They put the tree of Calvary into the place that was causing the problem. You get it? And so now we see that type coming forward. So it wasn't a scientific act, it was a prophetic act, and it pointed toward what God would do in the future by using a tree. If you carefully obey, he says, I will be Yahweh Rapha, or Jehovah Rapha, your healer. That which causes death, I'm going to be your healer. I'm going to bring that healing. In 16, though, they're grumbling again. And they say it would have been better to have died by the Lord's plague where we had plenty to eat and we could do. I don't know how they remembered their life, but as slaves, all of a sudden they're remembering it as ideal. And God's trying to take them to something better, but now they're grumbling once again. God gives them the meat and the manna, as you see. They failed their instructions again. God said, here's what you need to do, but nope, they were out there trying to store and hoard up the manna. Of course, it turned into worms, and we want to use that lesson today, and we want to say, don't let your miracle turn into worms. Make sure that you obey God. Make sure you follow his obedience. We see this again, this reminder to obey God. Very important throughout Scripture. Jesus says, if you obey my commandments, if you obey my teachings, in the Old Testament, we see the same thing. It's still important today to obey God, and these are lessons that we need to learn. And for 40 years in the wilderness, God provides for them miraculously through the manna. So that's pretty much it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the reading and the commentary. We look forward to seeing you next time on Through the Bible.